Hi, I'm Georgia. Thanks for joining me. Using all Sculpey clays today, burnt orange, beige, and then opal. And I'm going to be putting them into a Skinner blend. So I've rolled them all out on number 0 on my Atlas 150, shaped them into balls, and then shape into teardrop shapes. So you make the one end a little bit pointed. And then you lay them opposite each other. So you have a pointed end, a stubby end, and a pointed end. And then that will go through the pasta machine. But before I put it through the pasta machine, I always like to roll it by hand, just to start it off. So you roll it out, always in the same direction, turn it over, and then you match the orange to the orange, the beige to the beige, and the opal to the opal, trying to keep the colours together as much as you can. As you're working with it, it does start drifting, and you do have to let it do its own thing at times. But if you try to keep the colours together, that would be better. And then they start blending together. So you can, it does get bigger as you're rolling it. It tends to stretch out a bit. So I just push the ends in. And that's after it's been rolled through the pasta machine. Always roll it in the same direction and then roll it until you're happy with the colours. I'm trying to make it narrower here. So I divided it into 3, rolled it over on itself, and that will go through the pasta machine in the same direction again to make one long thin strip, which is actually quite sticky because it's another warm day when I was doing this. I always cut the ends off at a slight angle so that they fit in nicely, and then just gently turn it over, start it off well, and just roll it in on itself, and keep going and keep patting along the length of it so that you're getting rid of any air bubbles, should there be any there. As you can see, it's sticky and it's sticking in on itself. So just keep rolling, pushing the ends in to keep the size, and then pushing the middles to get the air bubbles out, should there be any air bubbles. And I've done it darker to lighter. Hindsight, I should have used all translucent clay to do this because it didn't turn out, surprise, surprise, the way that I wanted it to turn out. But I thought I'd show you anyhow because you get ideas from other people. I certainly do. And even though it's not something I might do, there might be something that I can take away from, you know, even if it's only one thing that I pick up from a tutorial. When you do watch a lot of them, you pick up an awful lot. So I've rolled it out and I'm going to wrap it in that burnt orange again, just fairly roughly. There's a little gap there which I patch in because we're going to roll it so it will make it all neat again. Cut off the scraggly bits at the end and then start rolling. If you see any holes, you can patch it, as well as air bubbles. You can cut them out because we're going to roll it such a lot. It will smooth out those cut marks. So as you roll, I always push in the sides a little bit to keep it neat. And what I'm showing you there is that there, if you go, put your hands moving towards each other, it makes it smaller. If you put them away from each other, it makes it bigger. And then I'm just using an acrylic block just to keep it all even and to keep it nice and smooth. And just do that all down the length of it. cut off that end piece, and then that's what it looks like. Now if that had all been translucent, that would have looked very different. Now as I cut the little pieces, I'm rolling, because the clay is very soft, I roll it so it keeps its shape. Although saying that, with the little pieces that I've cut off, I'm going to be reshaping them so that they're flatter and random shapes as well. So, and I wanted all different sizes of the little discs. And it's surprising how many discs you actually need. I didn't make a very large slab at all, and I seem to be making loads of these little discs. There you go, just roll it out for the pieces that you want, flatten it with your roller. And even more. The ones at the top left I don't use in this part of the video, I use them later on. So I've rolled them all out, and then I've got a piece of translucent, sewn at white translucent, which I've rolled out, I think, on number 4 or even 5 on my pasta machine. And then just place these little discs randomly on your piece of translucent. And I've tried to do different shapes and put them in different directions as well. As you can see, that I cut an awful lot of those little discs, but it didn't go very far. It doesn't matter if they overlap each other. In fact, that's almost what you want. Roll out some more. And just fill up as much as you want to on that. Now there are uneven thicknesses, which is fine because some of the bigger ones will spread out over the others, and you will get that random shape again. Hopefully that's the last little one. No, more. Then I cut off the excess white translucent. Obviously that can go back in the packet and you can use that again. Then what I do is I go around, and if I see that there are any gaps, I push them in with my fingers just to fill in the gaps. Although it does help because we do have that translucent clay at the back, so it would hold everything together anyhow. I've just used some printing paper there, which I'm burnishing the top of the clay. And then I've got these depth guides, so obviously when I put them either side, and then I roll over those, and it will stay at a constant depth. But instead of using just a plain roller, I'm using a textured roller to do this. Put a little bit of, oh, there's the dog. She's back. I thought she was playing with her toys in the room, but she's obviously got bored. Oh no, that doesn't work, does it, Georgia? Put it the other way around. And that texture sheet, you can roll in any direction. Dust off any cornstarch. I like to do that in case it gets caught in the little grooves, because it's very hard to get rid of once it's actually in your clay. burnish again, but not too hard so that you can still see some of the texture, which I think you can there. And then I'm obviously texturing a bit more. Now look how tiny that little piece of clay is, all those little pieces. I'm dipping my cutter into cornstarch to stop it sticking, and then just cutting out. Come on, wiggle, wiggle, wiggle. Out you come. And what I think I do is I will go back, once I've cut these out, I will go back over with the cutters. If you can hear that noise, that is my dog playing with the security gate that I have, or child gate that I have in the room. She's pulling it backwards and forwards. I'm sure she'll want to go out in a moment, but we'll carry on for as long as we can. Yes, so dust with the cornstarch and then cut your pieces out. There, you see I've gone over again just to clear the little fuzzies off at on the sides. And then I always try to, if there are any holes in the pieces, I always try and clean them as much as I can, because it can be very difficult to get a piece of sandpaper in to sand those edges. Clean all that off. Then I will put that on a baking tray. I've got a very heavy baking tray. I don't do a light one because that would buckle with heat over time. I put card at the bottom, put my pieces on there, and then I will put a piece of printing paper on top and another tile face down on top of that. Unfortunately, they didn't turn out as nicely as they looked. Well, they did look quite nice there, but when they were baked, you couldn't really see the different colours. So I'm using up all the little bits of scrap clay that I had, cutting off the little white edges so that they don't appear in the middle of the pattern. Just take those off. If you do get a white edge, just put another piece of clay over it, in which case this is the orange that I'm doing. Yeah, there we go, put a bit of that on. Otherwise you see the white edges. Sometimes that can be nice if that's the effect that you want. But I wanted it all the same colour here. Roll it all together, and that looked quite pretty there. But it doesn't show up like that once it's baked. Had it been translucent, it would be different. Right, so I'm using up as much of this clay as I can. And I'm doing some smaller earrings. And when they come out, they weren't great, as I said. So what I did is I put resin on the top of them, and inside the resin I put some glitter. So not much glitter, because you don't want to put too much glitter in resin because it blocks the light. So only a little bit, and that they came out okay there. Right, so these are all the scrap bits of clay that I've got. So just get them, all your pieces together, thinking there what I can do with them. I think there's only one thing to do, chop them all up together, mix them in. Just go through so that you've got big pieces and little pieces. And then I'm putting some acrylic paint on there. This is Arteza, and I think it's titanium white. That's that very thick acrylic paint that I have. It does coat it quite nicely. I'm surprised I'm using that. I'm sure I'm going to end up with my fingers in a while doing that. But you can do, I mean, the other thing you can do as well is that you could put all the little pieces in a plastic bag, put some of your acrylic paint on it, blow in the bag so it inflates it, and then just shake them around, and that will coat all the pieces. There we go. I knew I wouldn't last very long using that. So I'm just separating them all because obviously there are some parts that have not been coated with the paint. So I'm trying to get all the little pieces coated with that white acrylic paint. And then I'm going to be adding some gilding flakes, and that's by Cosmic Shimmer, and I think they're called Red Flame. Very, very pretty, all different colours, copper, gold, almost bronze in there as well. And I thought that would look quite nice with the orange. So mix that in with your other pieces. And this does stick quite nicely together, this one. Sometimes if you have a problem where they're not sticking together because the paint it's dry and it's not sticking together, you could add a little bit of translucent clay, liquid clay to it, and that would keep it all combined nicely. Then I form it into a block. I love these large ceramic tiles. There's so much you can do on them. You mess one part of it up and you can move on to another. But I don't in this case, obviously, because I've got the camera where it is. I'm starting to get used to the camera being exactly in front of me. And that was really sticky, that was. Well, that's a wet wipe, just a baby wipe that I'm using. Okay, so I've pressed it nicely together into a block. And now I'm just going to slice pieces. I never use the first and the last piece. Well, saying that, I hope I don't, because generally I don't. But I don't know what I've done in this one. I might have used it, put it in somehow. Right, and then cut your slices as evenly as you can, and then don't use that last little bit. So always cut your first and last as thin as you can. And then lay them all next to each other. And if you do get little gaps again, just try and push the clay into the gaps. Oh, I did. Did I use the, yeah, no. Push that all together and roll them out again. And then I'm going to put it through the pasta machine. So that will be on a 0 again on my Atlas 150. Using the translucent white again at the back, which I needn't really have done. I think I'd probably got away without using a backing, but I always worry that I haven't got all the little gaps together, and if you put a backing on it, it makes it so much more solid. Look at that cutter. Now I thought I was very brave using that. That is quite a involved cutter, and I think, well, it took a long time to finish it off nicely after I'd baked it. So coat this really well with your cornstarch and get into, especially the pointed areas, get into the pointed areas. Push it down. Go halfway down and then do it again so that you cut through all those layers. I think I had to stand up to do that. And then do the same with the other one. Push it halfway down, take it off, put more cornstarch in, reposition it. It will find its place, and then push it down again. And once again, take as much of that cornstarch off as that you can. I think the rest are just They're certainly not as intricate as those two on the bottom there. These are almost organic triangles, and then little ones. So remove your skeleton clay. Oh, they were sticking. They hadn't cut through as well as they should have. And you can see that as you try and lift it off, it almost distorts them a bit. So be aware of that. Obviously, it's only with cutters like this. They're very, very complicated. But they're very pretty, and I think they're worth the effort. So get out all those little pieces in between. No, I'm still not happy with those. Get them off, tidy around all the edges again, and they can also go onto that baking sheet. Yeah, you see, you have to multiple times, but because it's been cut virtually all the way, it does find its place. Those little middle bits just didn't want to come out. So I'm pushing them up, but look how, oh, that's so messy at the back there. Really, really messy. So there was a lot of tidying up on this one. And I've taken a X-Acto knife blade and just trying to cut through those little edges. Stick it down well onto your tile when you do that, and then just follow the shape. I did spend a lot of time on these. And once again, try and clean those middles out as best you can, because it's so difficult to get in there. Obviously, if you've got little bits that are a bit rough, you can still sand them again when you know, certainly the edges of those. Back with that cutter. And then back with the knife again. It's also quite nice as well, when you're working with cornstarch, you tend to get a little bit of it on your fingers, so it almost coats them. So when you are holding these fiddly little things, there's almost like a buffer between your hands and the clay, and it makes it easier to work with rather than having it stick to your fingers. I could have taken this out, you didn't have to see all this. But just keep going. Tidy the middles out again. Right. Okay, so there were scraps left over from that, so I put them all together, rolled them out, and I'm going to use a silk screen on this one. And I'm using a metallic gold, and that metallic gold is Venetian gold. It's a very, very rich gold, and that's by Decoart. Now, you wouldn't think that that would show up on that orange, but it does. Once again, it's certain lights that will catch it. Cut out the shapes you like. Looking at this now, as I'm doing the voiceover to it, I when I was doing it, I couldn't really see that gold paint, but now it's quite clear where it is. Just keep going with finding whichever cutters fit the spaces. I thought I'd just show you all the different things that you can do from one starting point. There's so many different things that you can do with your leftover clay, or which could potentially have been leftover clay, but you've actually used it. I know sometimes when we do stuff and you think, oh, it's just not right. It's, you know, I always try different. You can see there's little bits of opal sticking out there, which is always the one drawback with using opal. The flakes stick out the edges and you have to sand them off. But yeah, I always, before I actually give up on a project, I always try different things with it. And sometimes the mistakes will look nicer than what you've actually planned. And that dark bit that I showed you was actually dark glitter. And here they are. Those have come out quite pretty. I hope you've enjoyed this. Please let me know in the comments. If you have, please subscribe or even just like. Until the next time. Bye for now.